towards a radical reformation of Christianity. Selected works from Avatar Adidar Samraj. Compiler's notes. A most critical understanding. Christianity and the teachings of Jesus are not one and the same. There is much overlap, of course, but Christianity suffers from its imperialistic foundations as well as its provincial wrappings. We need to winnow the good news of Jesus from the institutional limits and propaganda of the early church, the medieval church, and the modern churches. It is useful to do a critical review of every historical religion, for then we can jettison the limited understandings of the heart of the matter. I am the way, the truth, and the light was attributed to Jesus of Galilee 2 millennia ago. Does that mean if we want to follow the way to the most perfect happiness, we should cultivate a love for Jesus, the Anointed? What if the answer to this question is yes and no? How could it be both? But what if we read the Bhagavad Gita and find it resplendent with such speech by Krishna? What if you dove into the heart of the Islam and found very similar words? Indeed, every great religion alludes to the transcendental self. Where does this leave every religion's proclamation? The speech of the God-possessed saviors, sages, and avatars cannot be truly understood only on the most mundane level. What a sin that would be! And yet provincial or traditional beliefs tend to be comprised of just such concrete and mythic understandings, and this limited and provincial understanding remains widespread. Thus, the speech of the God incarnate tends to be interpreted in an exclusive manner rather than an ecstatic one. But what if this critical understanding between the exclusive voice and ecstatic speech were exquisitely illuminated with a clear voice? Is such a voice possible in our doubt-filled and modern times? If so, we must prepare ourselves to critically listen to penetrating wisdom and open our minds to hear a refreshed round of good news. Perhaps to hear the heart's brilliance in a multitude of divine illuminations on the truth and heart of Christianity by the clear voice of Avatar Adidar Samraj. From his book Up, 2006. A prophetic criticism of great religions. The religious awareness and experience of the Western world is trapped within an archaic structure of myths, dogmas, and irreducible social conflicts that no longer serve the true religious and spiritual process of humankind. These myths, dogmas, and irreducible social conflicts are, even now, being forcibly perpetuated by the large-scale cultural, political, and economic dominance of the religions of the ancient world. Human beings themselves cannot awaken to the esoteric process that fulfills their spiritual heart impulse until the spell of mythological and ego-possessed thinking is broken, and a unified whole bodily culture of humankind in which East and West will realize a new cultural synthesis cannot take place until all the old religions are submitted to the principle of truth itself, or to the universal principle of prior unity and the inherently egoless transcendental spiritual principle or self-condition that is reality itself. As a matter of urgent necessity, for the sake of global cooperative order and peace. It must be universally accepted that every human being and every collective human manifestation, and thus every religion, must be always held subordinate and accountable to the self-evident and universally self-manifested truth that is reality itself. People tend to think of religion as a benign influence on individual thought and behavior, and this is indeed the case when the more benign aspects of religious awareness and experience begin to inform the thought and behavior of any individual. Yet, in the context of the larger world of the collective of all of the humankind, religion is only rarely found to be functioning on the basis of its benign aspects, and indeed, most characteristically, the ego-based and even negative aspects of religion are most apparent in the collective and inherently non-sectarian larger world of all of humankind together. And at large, it is certainly the case that very few individuals become truly creative personalities, mystics, saints, or even reliably good men or women as a result of their religious beliefs and associations. Religion is, in general, an exoteric cultic phenomenon that controls the thought and behavior of individuals through external and psychologically manipulative techniques. Thus, the principal religious phenomenon that is common in the world is not true or free religious awareness and benign behavioral habits on the part of individuals. The principal phenomenon of religion is all the separate and separative institutions that contain and otherwise manipulate broad and massive segments of the human population. The primary institution within any religious tradition is itself the religion, insofar as any religion affects the world at large. And a large-scale or great institutional religion is, because of its worldly public status, not primarily a benign power in the world. One has only to look at the cultural and political conflicts in the total world of today to see that the immense institutions of ancient religion have now become, for the most part, contentious, absolutist, and the perennial sources of irreducible social conflicts. And great religions characteristically are established and their power legitimized by a nearly indivisible union with the state or the otherwise secular national power. And the problem of all of this is made extreme by the immensity of these great religious institutions, each of which controls even many millions of people. The power of the great traditional religious institutions is, for the most part, a worldly power. That is to say, these institutions are actually political and broadly social agencies that manipulate the political, social, and economic motivations of the citizens of all nations. The only public alternative is control of the people by exclusively secular political institutions, which tend to suppress and exclude not only religious institutions, but also every kind of benign religious and otherwise esoteric awareness, experience, practice, and association. And this pattern of enforced secularization has also begun to spread to many areas of the world that have traditionally been under the powerful influence of religious institutions. In the popular media of the present time, small, non-establishment religious groups are often, with negative and demonizing intent, called cults, thus making such groups fair game for hostile and suppressive commentaries. Nevertheless, any religious or otherwise esoteric group of non-orthodox sect or even great religion may appropriately be called a cult if the word cult is intended simply to mean a system and a cultural devotion to a particular subject. Therefore, all exoteric religions and all esoteric sects or cultural entities are cults, and to use the word cult with bad intentions is nothing but a power game, whereby established cults and the agencies within the larger society which support the dominance of the local established cults make suppressive efforts to subordinate, delegitimize, and exclude the non-established cults. Indeed, the fact of the matter is that in general, non-establishment cults or minority sects are, characteristically, oriented toward the promotion of a more universal or deprovincialized and non-tribal and not at all bonded to the state form of the religious or otherwise esoteric practice of life. Truly, the worldly domain of the establishment of so-called great institutional religions, and not the small-scale and especially esoteric domain of non-establishment religions and otherwise sacred institutions, represents the most direct and practical threat to human development and ultimately to the communication of the truth of reality itself. Why is it that great religious institutions, which seem to be founded on the greater human and cultural persuasions, ultimately become the primary basis of social conflict and even personal neurosis? The reason is that great or popular, necessarily public-oriented and even state-bonded religious institutions are, because of their orientation, obliged to include and identify with and even to pander to masses of immature people who have very little will or capability for the practical, personal and cultural exercise of true religious or otherwise spiritual or esoteric life. As a result, the institutions of great religion develop much like the institutions of state develop under the same conditions of universal human immaturity. And indeed, because of that likeness, great religions and even all establishment institutions are characteristically bonded to the state in which they are established and by which their public power is legitimized. Thus, true religion or otherwise esotericism in general characteristically eschews mere popularism and all subordination to establishment cults and all tendencies toward the non-separation between religion and state. Every popular or even great religious institution tends, except during periods of renewal by living adept realizers, to become more and more dogmatic and eventually to become irrevocably associated with fixed ideas that, in one manner or another, and to one or another degree, deny the very and necessarily esoteric, recondite, and intensively demanding truth, relative to which all religions and all mere ideas are mere pointers. Likewise, the fixed-mindedness of dogmatic popular religiosity also tends, vigorously and in its presumptuous, culturally superior manner, to deny the religious authenticity of religious completeness of people who belong to other religious institutions or cultures. The conventional or ego-based and ordinary or merely public-oriented and therefore less than truth-oriented religious institutions, like any other mortal or inherently threatened entity in the world, tends to become more and more centered in itself and more devoted, more or less exclusively, to its own survival and its own public power. Conventional religious or even esoteric institutions learn how to survive by serving and manipulating a massive membership that is largely incapable of true religious or otherwise esoteric responsibility in practice. This is done by minimizing the true religious or otherwise esoteric demand for literal and personal conversion of mind and action, and replacing that difficult demand with the easier, less rigorous, and more secular demand for mere allegiance to systems of myth, belief, ritual, dogma, and rote practice of ego-supportive methods and ego-reinforcing techniques. Thus, the condition of membership in most institutions of great or merely public-oriented and social society-bound religion is allegiance to fixed ideas and other outward or superficial signs of belonging to the cult, whereas true religious or otherwise esoteric practice is founded on active conversion of body and mind to the divine reality and on the acceptance of behavioral disciplines that, at the very least, make the individual as outwardly benign or socially self-restrained character. Of course, great institutional religions do recommend various social morality attitudes, but the practice of self-restraint is not made a condition of membership, except perhaps in the case of a few selected acts that are often, for absurd reasons, taboo. Furthermore, institutionalized morality tends to be associated with archaic, neurotic, and petty sexual and social taboos, rather than with the truly human obligations of ego-transcending love, service, and compassion. Likewise, most religious institutions today have abandoned the detailed and even ancient religious disciplines associated with right life, including, for example, the ancient recommendations relative to personal disciplines of a healthful dietary nature, such as the obligation to avoid meat or other killed food, impure food, toxic stimulants, and so forth. And the esoteric and universal spiritual techniques, teachings that are the only real significance of religion, have been almost totally abandoned and even lost by the non-esoteric orthodoxy of the great religions. In the conventional affair of popular religion, the communication of rigorous religious demands and also of esoteric understanding and practice is avoided because conventional religious institutions are truly to survive and are trying to survive and also to achieve or otherwise maintain public power by acquiring and maintaining massive memberships. Thus, conventional or popular public-oriented religion is promoted and sold by hyped appeals to the non-discriminating mind of every man. In contrast to conventional popular religion, true religion is a superior human impulse, founded in self-understanding and profound psychophysical conversion or change. However, over time, only false and merely exoteric or popular and public-oriented religious inventions are communicated by so-called great religions. And at last, not only is the esoteric truth and practice of true religion eliminated as the core of religious instruction, but the survival pressures of dogmatic popularism make both truth and right practice unacceptable. Thus, over time, great religions tend, in fact, to make true religion secondary to membership, and likewise, great popular religions or cults of dogmatic belief tend to become the enemies of authentic esotericism or of the experiential knowledge and the gnosis or the tacit knowledge beyond mind that makes both mere belief and mere ideas obsolete. This was the situation that confronted Jesus of Galilee, and it was and is the situation confronted by all prophets of true religion and all realizers within esoteric schools and traditions. Since actual and mature and both true and right religious practice has been generally or popularly replaced by outward adherence to false or deluding exoteric beliefs and merely superficial behavioral modifications, the true esoteric core of religion has lost its use within the great traditional cults that exist today. The entire affair of traditional religious institutions has become, in a sense, dangerous because such religious institutions long ago abandoned the practice of making true religious and esoteric participation in a condition of membership within the official domain of popular religious institutions. If the demand for authentic or wholly true and right participation had historically been continued, the institutions of religion that are now, as a matter of convention, called great, would likely have remained small esoteric communities, if they survived at all. However, the ancient religious institutions chose gross survival and worldly power to the exclusion of truth, and therefore they adapted to the world rather than persist in the demand that the world change itself. True religion is a universal and necessarily ego-transcending psychophysical motivation of human beings. However, up to the present stage in human history, only relatively few individuals in any generation have been willing and able to make the gesture that is true religion, or otherwise true esotericism. In their great numbers, most people have, up to now, never yet been ready or willing to adapt to the true and progressive practical, moral, devotional, spiritual, and transcendental wisdom culture of right life. An authentic true religious or otherwise esoteric institution must be devoted entirely to both the communication and the practice of religious or otherwise esoteric truth, and the relentless demand for right and always greater human transformation, and ultimately perfect truth realization. Historically, only relatively few people in any generation of humankind have been interested in accepting that truth message. An authentic, true religious or otherwise esoteric institution must never subordinate itself or its message to either the pattern and the demands of egoity itself, or to the stream of daily secular or worldly society. Indeed, until humankind in general is able to become truly religious or otherwise really awake, true religion or esotericism otherwise must remain largely prophetic in its function. That is to say, true religion or esotericism itself must even always accept the role of critic and thus of the outsider in the public and popular world, and true religion or esotericism otherwise must never become like the world or function as an insider within the world in order to become powerful and great in the world. Da.